work focuses on how to create more empathetic environments where people feel heard and understood. So I call this deep listening. Deep listening is about increasing the coherence of a group so that it can increase its signal and decrease its background noise. So some people call this resonance and some people call it vibe. So when people have the same cultural references, this totally cuts down on the opportunities for misunderstandings. But for collective intelligence, we're trying to achieve high coherence in groups comprised of very different cultures or people from different domains. Because if you have a high rate of signal in a diverse group, you can achieve a sort of super intelligence, which opens up the possibility for incredible rates of emergence, the kind of cutting edge thinking that comes out of MIT's Media Lab. So one of the reasons why this high level emergence rarely happens is that few people truly understand how knowledge works. Most people assume that knowledge is standalone, that if we look at the same thing, we all perceive the same thing. 10 people can be at the same meeting and come away with totally different views of it. Why? Because we all bring our own history and context to what we're interpreting. For example, several different people can witness the same event, but when they testify in court, they all have a completely different version. So it's not like they're lying. We just all see things and remember things completely differently. But modern knowledge management is based on the notion that there's one single reality, and this is adequately represented by a set of very boring notes written by one person. This kind of knowledge management is simply inadequate for the high level of complexity of information we're now dealing with and the very diverse people we have working together within organizations. So this discrepancy between the complexity we're forced to deal with on a daily basis and the very primitive knowledge tools and techniques we're using is leading to pervasive amounts of cognitive overwhelm. Even if people are actually listening to each other, which is honestly pretty doubtful since most people are just waiting around to talk, when they hear someone else, they process what the other says through their own lens, innocently adding all sorts of inferences that totally muddy up what the first person said. People speak using invisible, unspoken metaphors, images in their minds that they're trying to describe in words, because our brains think in metaphors and not words. So two people may be talking the same language, but using two different metaphors to store and interpret the information. Meaning that even when people speak the same language and are actually trying to listen, there's a lot of room for misunderstanding. To increase the amount of collective intelligence in a group, we can run clean language processes to turn these implicit metaphors into explicit. This allows a group to refer to what someone said in that person's own framework, allowing an apples to apples conversation. So clean language is a process of asking neutral questions, repeating back what someone says, and recording what they say in the same words and or metaphor that they're using. So it makes it substantially easier to get a diverse group of people on the same page, better able to understand and communicate with each other. So once each person can see each other's metaphors, you can then build up a group metaphor that includes everyone's different perspectives. And this is going to be really, really powerful. So the first aspect of deep listening is being able to have apples to apples and oranges to oranges conversation. The next part of deep listening is the acknowledgement that people's brains all process information differently. So have you heard about that book, The 5 Love Languages? It talks about how people have different styles of how they like to receive love. Well, it turns out the same is true with knowledge. People have very different ways of how they like to receive knowledge. Some people like to receive it through their ears, but to others, like myself, long auditory conversations start to sound like blah, blah, blah. And I start losing the thread. So people like me need a much higher signal to be able to understand what's happening. It really helps if there's someone summarizing the main points. Even better if someone else is drawing little pictures that represent the concepts being talked about. And it'd be great if a person were also searching for appropriate links to help people follow up on the information reference. The point is, you create roles for people to better express what's happening and more avenues for people to be able to understand what's being said. Let's get beyond meeting notes, which are from only one person's perspective and only capture a very small percentage of the bandwidth of communication. This style of deep listening allows people more creativity and expression while cutting down on cognitive waste. The third aspect of deep listening is realizing that much of knowledge is embodied. This means that anything we see and hear and feel is interpreted by our eyes, our ears, and our hands. And likewise, much of what we communicate is also through our bodies. In fact, most of human communication is done through body language and not through verbal language. Before doing research, I had no idea that this was the case. And I'm not always great at picking up body language. So I had no idea how many cues I was missing. So now, in addition to listening what people are saying with their words, I've trained myself to better listen with my eyes. The point is that most knowledge management practices are based on this really old notion of knowledge being something totally unattached to the body, as if we could just upload our thoughts into a computer, download them into another body, and be good to go, the same person in another body. And that's just simply not how knowledge works at all. Our knowledge often makes zero sense when it is taken out of context of our physical bodies, yet none of our knowledge systems seem to take this into account. To build more empathetic environments, we need to put more emphasis on somatic intelligence. We need to acknowledge that there are people on the spectrum who might be missing out on a large part of the communication that's happening because they don't know how to interpret certain signaling processes that come naturally to others. And these same neurodivergent people might pick up on cues that other people are missing, but their special gifts often do not find outlets. Finally, we need to make friendlier environments for kinesthetic learners. So just to summarize, there are 3 ways to substantially boost group communication. First, teach people to use clean language to better understand each other. Second, respect and honor the plethora of learning styles. And third, acknowledge that much of the knowledge cannot be divorced from our physical bodies. These 3 things will make a significant improvement in the coherence of any group.